Hello, I'm Abdul Saad, clinical psychologist at Vital Mind Psychology here in Sydney, Australia, and I hope that at the time that you're watching this video you are well and that you are safe wherever you happen to be in the world. Sending you the best greetings and wishes. So I'm excited to be recording this video as a rounding up of this series on the spiritual dimensions of narcissism. And the intention with this video is to really tie up a lot of the loose ends and provide a comprehensive, survey of the landscape that I believe we need to understand in order to access our higher self and transcend the inevitable narcissism that is a feature of all ego structures, all egos, mine and yours. So coming back to you and me and the narcissism within all of us, a narcissism born out of the fact that all of us, save those who came to this earth already enlightened and whose very birth was miraculous, the person and archetype of Christ, all of us have had to develop an ego structure or a defense strategy that substitutes for our inability to continue to abide in being, that is, in the pure consciousness of the non-ego world that we see infants abide in their first months of life. So what is the way forward? How do we rediscover our center and live in a higher state of consciousness that transcends the smaller self, the egoic self, the fruit of this transcendence, the fruit of which is increased inner peace? We are all aware of the deep pain of estrangement and disconnection that we all scramble to deal with, but with limited tools that usually only numb our feelings or project them onto others. So how do we heal this estrangement? I have some humble thoughts to offer as potential guidance. The first step, as I currently understand it, is to begin to develop the courage to look inward and come to know the truth about ourselves. This means stepping outside of the story our mind or ego structure has created about who we are, where our worth comes from, who has hurt us and why. And stepping outside does not mean dismissing or assuming whatever we think is incorrect, but to have the courage to examine it with compassion and curiosity, which allows us to access a more powerful realm of our consciousness. For most of us today, such an endeavor usually takes the form of psychotherapy, coaching, finding a spiritual advisor, or joining a group which is founded upon some integrous teaching which has stood the test of time, and of course also returning to the practices and teachings of an integrous, orthodox world tradition. And by that I simply mean one of the recognized traditions of the world, whether an Eastern tradition, a Western tradition, but something which has stood the test of time and is not simply, some cultish movement or a human invention, but the orthodox traditions which have stood the test of time. And this is not an exhaustive list, but amongst them would be the Eastern traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, the Western traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, but by no means is that exhaustive, but they are examples of what I mean by orthodox traditions. But it can also, accessing such teaching can also take the form of reading books on psychology, self-transformation, spirituality, and human development. But it usually requires access to teachers and teaching who can guide us along the path of self-transformation, as we cannot do this work all on our own. We can't, in a way, use the ego mind to solve the problems of the ego mind. We do need guidance from people who have gone down that path, who have trodden the same path, who have at some level, achieved a high level of consciousness. Not necessarily enlightenment. That's not the prerequisite for a therapist or a guide. It certainly is not where I'm at. But someone who has developed the intention to continue their journey of inner work. So this first step is the courage, the first step in terms of breaking out of the smaller self, the narcissistic self, breaking free of the shackles of whatever story our ego has created. The first step is the courage to look inward. And this is a critical step, and it takes an immense amount of courage. It requires us to break through the doubts and the self-defeating thinking of it won't work, no one will understand, it's too expensive, I'll just do it on my own, I'm beyond help. Because it's this first step which gets us to cross the threshold of courage. It's the beginning of the creation of a miracle in our lives, the miracle to begin transcending the limits of our smaller self and to start to experience and relate to ourselves and others from our larger self. Once we've taken this first critical step and have formed the intention to commit to the organic unfolding of the process of inner work, of taking ownership, of processing our wounding and releasing it, of allowing ourselves to work through our suppressed emotions and to heal the inner child within, we enter a field where it becomes possible to dramatically shift our perception of reality. We begin the process of expansion, of seeing and experiencing things we could not before. And once we experience them, those profound insights, those deep shifts, we can never unexperience them. We are forever changed. But again, the price of entry for accessing this level of consciousness and personal power, of tapping into this energetic field, is the courage to come to know the truth, not to confirm our preconceived or pre-baked ideas, but to work through them and to heal them and to examine them with courage and to see that whatever defenses we formed were formed innocently but now no longer serve us. This also means we begin to extend to others the same understanding, that they too are stuck in their own defenses. And that does not mean we condone abuse or bad behavior, but it means that we can access critical context and understanding that can heal and liberate us. We get sidetracked when we become hyper-focused on the other. In many instances, this becomes an unhealthy detour, which keeps us stuck from doing the inner growth work we need to do. From this level of consciousness, we begin to access increased powers of empathy, reason and discernment. Feelings of victimization rapidly decline, and we no longer find ourselves recreating the same old patterns, or we are aware when we are recreating them and find ways not to stay stuck in them for anywhere near as long. Slowly but surely, with purity of intention, with sincerity and commitment to an integrous teaching, a set of practices, and ultimately our surrender to divinity, we begin to see the fruit of our inner work. We all have different starting points for the journey depending on our initial level of wounding. For those of us with more complex trauma, the process begins with the basic but profound and sacred work of beginning to heal our nervous system, our relationship with our body, and healing those parts of us that are terrified, that feel ashamed and unworthy. The role of a good therapist, coach, teacher, guide, mentor, spiritual advisor is that they can meet us where we are at and that they have a holistic view and understanding of the human condition. They're able to see the human condition in its appropriate context. One of the critical elements of this process of expansion beyond the narrow, egoic, smaller self with all its constraints, pettiness, infatuation with its own opinions, and its quickness to judge and condemn others and itself, is the process of inspiration. Inspiration is when we are touched by and experience that slice of paradise lost, the purity of who we truly are beneath our personality defense strategies. We can be inspired by the beauty of nature, by the smile of another human, the beauty of art, by the uplifting energy of a sage, avatar, or teacher, by the profundity of scripture and of certain types of music, by an incantation or a recitation. One of the things that personally gives me a great level of inspiration is the instrument called the oud in Arabic, or oud in English, O-U-D. And if you don't know what that is, just type into YouTube oud music, O-U-D, and see if that touches you in the same way it does me. So what inspires you? Start a collection of those things that inspire you. It might be certain types of music you add to your playlists, quotes, videos, pictures, certain locations you visit, teachers you listen to. I know for me, as primarily an auditory learner, listening to lectures, listening to books that are inspirational is profoundly uplifting for me. For others that are more visual learners, reading is maybe more your thing. So when we feel inspired, uplifted, and temporarily taken into a realm which is otherworldly, we feel joy, awe, and sometimes tears and feelings of deep profundity. We are getting in touch with our true self, our larger self, the self that is deeply connected with the entirety of consciousness. We desperately are in need of more sources of inspiration in our lives, to be moved, even temporarily, into a higher realm of consciousness, even for a few moments, where we can see things differently, can begin to profoundly shift our perception of reality. Inspiration gives us an experience beyond the mind. It touches our soul, and it paves the way for motivation, the motivation to begin the process of inner work, of change, to take the leap of faith and begin making the changes we need to make. This again is the critical ingredient of courage, which is the spark which ignites the process of finding our way home, of accessing our higher self, our true self, back to who we truly are. But inspiration and motivation alone are not enough. They will get us moving, but they're not enough to keep us going. Kind of if you drive manual or stick, like I love to do. It's a dying art today, unfortunately. First gear will get you going, but it's not going to get you very far. So inspiration and motivation alone are not enough. They'll get us moving, but they're not enough to keep us going, like first gear in a car. They provide the spark to ignite the process. What keeps the process of inner work and growth going is dedication, our sincere commitment by faith, even though we have not fully experienced the fruit of our inner work. It is our dedication, our commitment that will see us through the inevitable ups and downs of our journey. Those times of crisis, those setbacks which cause us to go into doubt, to lose faith, to regress. Dedication will weather all those storms. Our dedication to a set of practices, integrous teachings, to the continued evolution of our consciousness, our dedication to surrender our will to divinity, to surrender to the guidance which is presently unfolding in our lives rather than fighting it. And if the word surrender has negative connotations for you, then think about it as giving up, giving over, releasing the yoke, releasing the burden. If the word surrender carries negative connotations, which is not the meaning of is not the context in which is used here, as in a surrender as a resignation or a defeat. No, this is a surrender which is a liberation, a lightening, a jettisoning of that which is no longer needed. So I'm just checking that I'm on the right slide here. So in closing this series on the spiritual dimensions of narcissism, my hope is that the material presented here has helped you to expand your viewpoint on the human condition, to see narcissism as a pervasive element of all ego structures on a sliding scale or continuum. And also to begin to see if you have been hurt in your life by someone whose personality structure is deeply weighed down by their narcissism. It is an opening. This experience that you've had, this negative experience, is an opening for beginning or continuing your own inner work journey. Not to get stuck compulsively studying the character pathology of the other person. Although there is a place for such study, I'm not denigrating it, but let's not make it our zip code, or as we say in Australia, our postcode, where we permanently reside. We don't want to get stuck there. And that can create a block for our own inner transformation, which is very tragic if that happens. So I hope this message finds you well wherever you are watching in the world. I know that we have a viewership that extends to all the continents, to all of humanity, to people of faith, to people who identify without a faith, to people of different backgrounds and cultures. And I just want to say, I come to you with this message with no preconceived ideas. It's a message from my heart to yours, from my humanity to your humanity, without any preconceptions, prejudgments, without any labels. And I hope that this message has touched your heart, just like my heart was touched when I was writing it and I was inspired to write these words. So, thank you very much. Look after yourselves and one another. I look forward to speaking with you again, God willing, and I am, God willing, looking forward to something that is really brewing for the work that's being done here, including the development of an online course, God willing, for empaths. A course that I think will really build on what I've shared in the beginning years of this channel, but take things to another level for you, God willing, for those who would be inspired to access such content. But that is a work in progress. That's still very much in the quantum, and we're sort of going to pluck it out, God willing, and make it a reality. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to upload any more new videos for the rest of the year. I'm just being very honest with you, but we'll watch this space, and if I'm inspired to say something, then I will. But if I don't, I'll see you whenever I see you, God willing. Until then, look after yourselves and one another and take good care. And let me know in the comments section if you felt inspired or touched by anything that was said. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.